Hello, my name is Frank Jernigan. I'm the developer of the website franco.com, where you can generate a sweater pattern that is custom fit to your measurements using the yarn and needle at the gauge that you knit. The spelling of the website is unusual. It's on the screen before you. Today I want to show you some cable crossovers, a lot of cable crossovers that are used in the pattern that is about to be published in Cast On magazine for the fall issue of 2021. It's called the Cable Challenge sweater because it's quite a challenge to knit it because there's so many cables and so many different types of cable crossovers. So I'll be demonstrating all of them today, and I will only show them once each, but I'll put a timestamp in the index below in the Read More section under this video, so you can choose to see the ones you want to see, and you can watch them over and over. And so that should be able to help you do them. The cables range from 2 stitches wide to 3 stitches wide, 4 stitches, 5 stitches, and 6 stitches wide. Why is it so complicated? Well, just take a look at the sweater. Here's the key to the chart that contains all of the stitches in the sweater. And as you see, there are 2 by 2 stitches. There are 3 stitch wide cables, 4 stitch wide cables, 5 stitch wide of 2 varieties. There's 2 over 3 in both directions, and there's also 2 over 1 over 2. And there's also 2 versions of 6 wide cables. One is 2 stitches over 4 stitches, and the other is 2 over 2 over 2. I'll demonstrate all of these cables, as I said. First, let me demonstrate how to work the 1x1 crossover cables without using a cable needle. Whenever I work a crossover, I first ask myself, what is the first stitch I'm going to work after the crossover is complete? If it's a knit stitch, I put the yarn in back. If it's a purl stitch, I bring it to the front before I change the crossover order on the needles. So the next thing I ask is, are the stitches on the far side going to pass over or under the ones on the near side? And if this is a right crossover of 2 cables, obviously the second stitch is going to cross over the first. Therefore, I pick up that stitch from in front. So when I take the 2 stitches off, with my finger pressed against the back of my right needle, I pull this left needle out and put it back into the stitch on the right. I cross the left one over to the right, and then I put it back on the needle. Now the 2 stitches are oriented in the order I want them to appear, so I simply knit them both. And the 1x1 crossover is complete. And as you see, it is a crossover to the right. To do a crossover to the left, the only difference is, again, I move the yarn to the back. I grab the second stitch from behind because it's going to pass behind the first stitch, making the first stitch be the visible one crossing over from right to left. So this is a left-leaning crossover. I then put the 2 stitches back on in the corrected order, and I knit them. And that's how I do the 1x1 crossovers. As you see, the first one passes over to the right, the second one crosses over to the left. Next, I'll demonstrate 2 stitches over 1 stitch. So I will first demonstrate the 2 stitches crossing over to the right. So because they're going to cross in front, I grab them from in front. I grab the 2 stitches on my knitting needle like that. I press my finger in the back against the right needle to hold that stitch in place while I pull the needle out, and then I insert it back in to the single stitch that's crossing behind. I then bring the 2 stitches to the right and put them back on the knitting needle, and I knit the 2 stitches, and the stitch that crossed behind in some cases is knitted, and some cases it's purled. I'm not going to demonstrate both situations. I'm just going to purl this one, but I could have easily knitted it as well. And the key to the chart tells you which of those 2 to do. Oh, there is the right leaning 2 stitches over 1. Now I will do the left leaning 2 stitches over 1. And in order to do that, I position the yarn in front because I'm going to purl the next stitch that I bring from behind. I'm going to bring 1 stitch from behind, and I'm going to hold my thumb against the right needle. I'm going to pull the needle out of all of the stitches and then put it back in those 2 that I then carry over to the left side, and then put the 1 stitch back on the needle from the right side, and now I can just knit it in place, and then, purl it in this case, but it could have been knitted, and then I knit the 2 stitches that crossed in front. Next, I will demonstrate the 4 stitch wide cables. The first one we will cross over to the right, and get up to it. So I've got these 4 stitches. I want to take these 2 that are knit and pass them over these 2 that are purled. So I put the yarn in back because the next stitch I'm going to knit is going to be a knit stitch, and the yarn should be in back. I then put the needle through the 2 stitches I want to cross over, and because I'm crossing them in front, I put the needle in from front. I pull them out as before and put them back on the needle, and now I've got my knit stitches on the right needle. I move them back to the left needle where I can knit them. And then either knit or purl the other 2 stitches that cross behind, depending on which stitch I'm trying to create. And they're all used, left and right, both knitted and purled stitches on the back. Now I will demonstrate the 5 stitch wide cable. I'm going to take these 2 stitches and pass them over the next 3 purl stitches. Now this doesn't have both versions. All of the times you do 2 over 3 stitches, the 3 stitches are passed behind and are purled. So in order to do that, I put the needle through 3 stitches. If you notice there, the right needle is in the back, picking up these 3 stitches that I want to pass behind these 2 in front. I am then going to push my finger against the the needles and then put this needle back into the 2 stitches that are passing in front. I then place the back stitches, the ones that crossed in back, I place them back on the right needle, and I'm going to purl them. And I had already placed my yarn in front because I knew the next stitch I was going to do was a purl. I purl 3 stitches. And then I knit 2 stitches. And now I'll demonstrate how to pass 2 stitches over 3 stitches with to the right as opposed to the left. In that case, you simply pick up the 2 stitches you want to pass in front of the 3, and you pick them up from in front because you want to move them in front. And that's how you do that. Press your finger against the right needle to hold the stitches in place that you're removing from both needles. Put the needle back through the stitches, and then you bring the 2 stitches across the front and put them back on the right needle. You've now exchanged the needles and put them in the proper order. For working the stitches, you knit the 2, and then you purl the other 3. And now things are going to start getting a lot more interesting. We're going to do 5 and 6 stitch cables. First, we'll start with 5 stitch cables that are 2 over 1 over 2. And we will show how to do those right and left, and also not using a cable or using a cable. At least I'll show you how I use a cable, which is different than what most instructions would have you believe you should do. So you can do it however you like, but I will just show you how I do it. First of all, without a cable needle, it's the same idea. We're going to reorient the order of the stitches on the needles, but we're going to do it in stages. So the first 2 stitches are the far left are coming across these 3 stitches. So I'm going to begin as if I was doing a 2 over 3 crossover. I'm going to grab the 2 stitches, transfer those with the 3 stitches that were ahead of it, and then I'm going to knit them. I've completed the first 2 stitches of the 5 stitch crossover. Now I'm left with 3 more stitches, and I do 1 more crossover where I take the 2 stitches that are right here and I cross them over what was the middle stitch, which is here. So I'm going to cross these 2 over this 1. Oh, and I'm going to put the yarn in front because the next one to work is going to be that purl stitch. I grab that purl stitch from behind, so the 2 knit stitches go in front. I bring the purl stitch back to the right and put it on the needle, and then I purl it. And then I purl the 2 stitches that have moved to the left. And there we have the 2 over 1 over 2 right leaning. Let me show you how I do that when I decide things have gotten too tight or I'm having difficulty doing it without a cable for whatever reason, here's how I use a cable. I first want to knit these 2 stitches, and so I'm just simply going to take off the stitches and put them on a cable needle. I want those 2 stitches to pass in front of these 3, so I'm going to hold it in back. And then I'm going to knit those 2 stitches. Here's where I differ from most other people who write how to do cables with a cable needle. I don't knit anything or work anything off of the cable needle. I then put back the 1 stitch that needs to be purled, continuing to hold the other 2 stitches behind. I purl that stitch, and then I put the other 2 stitches back on the cable, on the left needle, so I can then knit them. Next we have the 2 over 1 over 2 cable crossing, where the crossings go to the left. I want these 2 stitches to go behind the others and be the next ones to knit. I take them from behind, I swap their place on the needle, and then I knit them. It's simply 3 stitches over 2. The next 2 are the knit stitches, and this is the purl, which I want to come back to the middle. So I'm going to pass it behind the other 2 that are left on the needle. And finally I'll knit the other 2. To use the cable needle, it works very similar to what I did before. I'm going to put the stitches on the left needle that I'm ready to knit or purl. So the first stitch that I want to knit is this one and this one, because I want those to be on this side. So I'm going to take the ones I don't want to work and put them on the cable needle. That's the first 3 stitches. And I'm going to hold them in front because I want those stitches to pass behind, so the ones that I'm holding off will pass in front and make it left leaning. I'll then knit those 2 stitches. Then if you look at what's on the cable needle, the next stitch on the cable needle is the purl stitch. So if I put it back on the left needle, I do in fact want it to be the next stitch in the series, so I'm going to put it back on there and purl it. Now I simply put the remaining 2 stitches back on the left needle and I knit them. On a split stitch, let me fix that, and then I will knit them. And that's how I work the left leaning 2 over 1 over 2 crossover using a cable needle. Now I'll demonstrate how to do 2/4 crossover cable without using a cable needle, because I don't use one when I do this. If you want to use a cable needle, I'm sure there are plenty of places that will show you how, and if you just watch my earlier segments of this video, you'll also get some insights there. I'm also not going to spend a lot of time explaining what I'm doing because the earlier segments will explain. I'm going to cross these two cables over the next 4. I've reoriented all 6 all 6 stitches on the left needle. I purled the 4 that I just brought from behind, and I knit the 2 that I just brought across the front. And now I'll show you the right leaning one. For the 2/2/2 cable crossings, I always use my cable needle. When I first started knitting the sweater, I did many of them without using the cable needle, and then I started using it and realized for this one I found it easier to do it with the cable needle. So I do. You might find your mileage may vary. Maybe you will find it easier to do it without a cable needle, and it can be done similar to how I showed you how to do the 2/1/2 without using the cable needle. We'll start with the left leaning one. And now I'll do a right leaning one. Well, I didn't promise that it would be easy or quick to knit, and I guess it's not. It's one of the more challenging sweaters I've ever created. That's why I call it the Celtic Challenge. I hope you'll take up the challenge and try the sweater, and I hope you'll love it as much as I do.